Good evening and welcome to Alan's Italy. Tonight we are going to be taking a look at a show that I've put together over the past several weeks. Took a very long time. I'll get to that in a few minutes. It's called The Towers of Italy, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. But first, okay, so here's the cover screen. And that's actually a picture of the Tuscan town of San Gimignano. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. What I'd like to deviate from for a moment is an idea that my assistant in the studio, Ellen, gave me a couple of weeks ago when she mentioned that there is a beautiful Italian town, a hill town, in southern Italy by the name of Matera. And it's in the region of Basilicata in southern Italy, which is just south of the region known as Puglia, and slightly to the east and south of the area known as Calabria. And I did research on this town. First of all, you could see that it's a very interesting hill town, but I did some research on it. And first, let me just show you where it's located, because I didn't know where it was myself, and excuse me. So, this is the heel of the boot, which represents Italy, and the town of Matera is right over here, which is almost right into the Gulf of I can't even read that. I'm not even sure, but it's right near the boot. It's right in this region, south of the town of Alberbello, and certainly southeast of Rome, and probably southeast of Naples. And it's, I did some research. This is what it looks like. Again, let me make that larger. And it's a hill town, very similar to many of the hill towns that we have visited. Civita di Bonareggio springs to mind immediately, but also the towns of Montepulciano and Montalcino. But look at these, this is an incredible town. It's actually built into the rock of a mountain. And the website that I was at indicated that people have been living in the same dwellings, many of which were carved right into the mountains as caves, for the past 9,000 years. Now, not only have people been living in this town for 9,000 years, but the implication was that people have been living, within the mountain for the past 9,000 years in the same kind of dwellings that have been carved out during that time, 9 millennia ago. So it's really quite an extraordinary story, and look at that beautiful town. There's a chance that we might be looking at this town to a greater extent in a few weeks, because Ellen knows somebody that might be able to help us out and do an interview with us, and we'll be able to actually take a closer look at this through her pictures. But look at this amazing town, and people are living in those same dwellings that people had been living in for 9,000 years. So to me, that's just extraordinary. This is another view of it. And carved right into a mountain. So we'll be looking at that hopefully in the future. But tonight, we are going to be looking at the Towers of Italy. And I'll tell you exactly how I got this idea. Frank Palaia will be coming on next Friday night, that's March 15th, and he will be showing his towers, and his towers are really a look not only at the towers, but a look at his amazing Polaroid photography that we have seen on this show before. And I was looking at his towers, and they're very interesting, and it's very exciting when he explains how he does some of these amazing things. But I decided that I would like to go through my photos, Laura and my photos, and come to many of the towers that we've come across in our many, many trips to Italy over the past, 13, 14 years. And I came across hundreds of towers in a variety of different categories. And I have spent the past several weeks putting them together into the various categories and so on. And I came up with this list of 7 different categories that towers exist in Italy. First of all, we have, and I'll explain what each thing really is as we go along, obelisks, columns, campaniles, the defensive towers that you see in castles, the towers of domiciles, like houses, the famous palazzi that are all over, and the towers in public buildings and spires. And I looked at some of the very famous towers throughout the world that people are the most familiar with. And of course, everybody is familiar with the Eiffel Tower. And of course, in the United States, in Washington, D.C., this is the Washington Monument, which is really, if you look at it, and I'll listen to what I say in a few minutes, it's really an obelisk. This, of course, are the towers that surround the Taj Mahal in India. And of course, this is not really a tower, but a very interesting looking, very similar kind of tower. This is one of the pyramids. This is actually a tower that I was very familiar with. I'm a student of the Civil War, and I've been to the the battlefield at Gettysburg many, many times. This is one of the monuments called the Eternal Peace and Light Monument, which is on the field of battle that took place during the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg on July 1st, 1863. Very famous tower in the state of Pennsylvania. Those of you who live in New York know that this is the tower that you see in the cloisters, which is in the northern part of Manhattan. And of course, this is a lighthouse on Cape Cod. So these are some of the towers that we are familiar with throughout what we have seen. And now I'd like to take a look at the concept of an obelisk. Now, obelisks are usually square in design. So you could see that it's a 4-sided rectangular, it's a rectangular 3-sided, 3-dimensional figure. And most of the obelisks that appear in Italy, most of which are in Rome, are from ancient Egypt. And during the time that the Roman emperors ruled Rome, mostly in the 1st century and 2nd century AD, they brought back a lot of the obelisks from Egypt. So this, for example, is the obelisk that appears in front of the church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which was brought to Rome by Domitian. And it's a very interesting obelisk because not only is it the Egyptian obelisk that was brought over, but you could see that at the bottom of the obelisk, just on top of the base, is an elephant. And that elephant was sculpted by Bernini. So this is really an Egyptian obelisk placed on top of an elephant that was sculpted by Bernini. So this is really a very interesting one. And you can see that building in the background. Those of you who may recognize it from a previous show will recognize that that building in the back is the Pantheon, which we'll be looking at a little later. And there it is now. There's the Pantheon from a completely different angle. This is looking at it from the north. The other one was looking at it from the south. This is an obelisk that was brought over and actually it was created during the time of the pharaoh Ramses II, and it was hidden underneath the church that we just looked at. You see this obelisk, you see there's kind of like a building right behind it to the right, and that is the church that this obelisk was found under in the year 1374, and it was placed in a variety of different places before it wound up right in the center of the Piazza della Rotonda in Rome, right in front of the Pantheon. This is a very famous obelisk that was brought from Rome by Caligula in the year 37 AD. This is an obelisk in the Piazza Navona in Rome that was brought by Domitian, and it stands right on top of the very famous Fountain of the Four Rivers, which is a fountain that was designed again by Bernini, and this dominates the very center of that piazza. Now, this obelisk, which you see up there on top of the steps, this is the famous Spanish steps, and the church that you see there is the Church of Scalinata della Trinità al Monte. And this particular obelisk that you see at the top there was from the Gardens of Sallust, which are famous Roman gardens of the 1st century BC that were kind of discovered in 1788, and many, many very famous Roman monuments and sculptures were found in this garden, the Garden of Sallust, one of which is the very, very famous Dying Gaul. This is one of the most famous sculptures that were ever found in ancient Rome. And this sculpture appears in the Capitoline Museum, and this was discovered in Rome underneath some rubble, as many of the very famous sculptures were, such as, for example, the famous Laocoon that was discovered in the early 16th century. This is the Piazza Santa Maria Novella, and you can see that there are two obelisks, one all the way at the very end, right in front of that loggia, and the other one sort of to the right of the screen. And here is a close-up of what that obelisk looks like. This is more of a pyramidal shape because it kind of tapers very severely up there. And you can see that it's actually an obelisk that is sitting on a pedestal, but there is a space between the obelisk and the pedestal. This is what's between those two things. This is a tortoise, and this is actually a sculpture that was created by Giambologna. This is not an ancient obelisk. This is an obelisk that was actually created by Giambologna, who was a famous Florentine sculptor who built this obelisk on top of a bunch of tortoises. There's one there, as you could see, but there are others throughout as well. Now, this is the 19th century view of the Piazza Santa Maria Novella, and those are the two obelisks at either end of the piazza, and these were used as end posts for chariot races. The chariot races took place around the periphery of the Piazza Santa Maria Novella, and those two obelisks were the end posts. Like, you know, the chariot would kind of go around, and when it got to the obelisk, it would, you know, then come around the other way. Now, and that was usually chariot races that took place during the Middle Ages. This is a lithograph of what the chariot races must have looked like in the Piazza Santa Maria Novella, but you could see that there are actually 4 obelisks, not 2 obelisks. So nobody's really sure, from what I could read, how many there actually were, but you know, the ones that are there now are 2 of them, and there may have been originally 4 of them, but it's hard to say because, you know, this could be more of an idealized view of what that piazza looked like during the Middle Ages. This is a famous obelisk that takes place, that is situated in the Piazza della Unità, which was a piazza that was created right after the unification of Italy in the year 1870. and it is located right in front of the very famous Hotel Baglione. And in the foreground, which you can't see, is the Church of Santa Maria Novella, and the people are walking towards the stazione, where the train station is located. So those are the various obelisks that existed that I came across. Then we come to columns. Columns differ from obelisks in that columns are rounded. They're cylindrical as opposed to squared off. And this is an example of a ancient Roman column that is currently located in the Piazza Colonna in Rome. This is perhaps the most famous column in all of Italy, certainly the most famous column in Rome. This is Trajan's column that was erected in the year 113. And this is the column that was made in order to commemorate all of the military accomplishments of the Roman Emperor Trajan. And this is still there. It's still in perfect condition. And I have even heard that you're allowed to take, this is much thicker than it looks, you're allowed to take an elevator up to the top, either an elevator or it's stair. I'm not sure if it's stairways, but you can go to the top and get a view of Rome from the top of that. This is actually, this is actually the Piazza Piazza San Marco in Venice. And I know that there's a Campanile over there on the left side, but what I'd like you to focus on are the two columns that are off over there straight ahead. Those two columns were erected by the Venetians to honor their two patron saints, Saint Theodore and Saint Mark's. And right between those two columns, they used to do public executions. So that's what that's known for. That's the view of it from the south, looking at it from the lagoon. And that's the view of it as you come on to the mainland, and the Doge's Palace is off there on the left side, and you see the obelisks right there straight ahead. Rather columns, not obelisks. Okay, then of course you have campaniles, and campaniles are usually attached to religious buildings such as churches, and they are either bell towers or they are clock towers, and we will be going through a lot of them today. This is a church which has bells, as you could see up there on the top, but it does not have a separate campanile. It is actually built into the church itself. This is the church of San Silvestre. Excuse me for just one moment. Okay. And it is located in the town of Viterbo. But in most cases, bell towers are built into the campaniles themselves. As you could see there, that is attached to the church of San Giorgio Maggiore, which is located in the Venetian lagoon. And that is one of the most well-known and evocative campaniles in all of Italy. Very recognizable. You've certainly seen it many times on this show. That's another view of it from a slightly different angle. And this, of course, is the very famous campanile that is located in the Piazza San Marco. And this is a better view of it. This is the view of it from the opposite side of the piazza. And this campanile has had a very interesting history over the past 1,200 years. And this is, what I have about it. It was built in the 9th century. There was a fire in the year 1489 that destroyed part of it, and it was rebuilt. Then in the year 1513, there was an earthquake that destroyed part of the campanile, and again, it was rebuilt. Then in the year 1745, there was a fire in the campanile, which destroyed part of it, and again it was rebuilt. And the story's not over, because in the year 1776, the campanile was struck by lightning and also destroyed, rebuilt. And then finally, on July 14th, 1902, the tower just simply collapsed right where it was. And it took down a couple of buildings around it. It's such a giant edifice that it just completely collapsed and had to be rebuilt. The rebuilding process took 10 years, and then finally in the year 1912, the tower was rebuilt. Now this Campanile, I am certain, has an elevator that takes you to the observation deck, which you could see at the very, very top with those windows right there. And the reason why most people go up there, well, here's another view of it. This is actually showing you not only the Campanile, but you see this part right here is the pavilion where you enter, and then you get into the elevator that takes you to the top. And people love this because when you do get to the top, which is right up there, you can see what it looks like looking out from there. This is the view you get. So this is one of the reasons why many people like to climb to the top of that Campanile, because that's the view that you get, which is pretty extraordinary, as you can see. This is the Campanile that's attached to the main Duomo in the town of Murano, which is right off the coast of Venice. This is another very interesting Campanile that actually not only has a bell tower, but also has a clock. This is also located in Murano. The Campanile you see over there on the right side, I could not get the name of it, but this is of course in Venice with the Rialto Bridge over there on the left with all the gondolas lined up at the gondola stop located near the Rialto. And this of course is Florence, and Florence is not known for its towers, but it does have quite a few very, very famous ones. For example, and this is a wonderful view of the towers of Florence, looking at it from the Piazzale Michelangelo to the south of the town. Now, over there on the extreme left is the Palazzo Vecchio with the bell tower right there. And then as you keep moving to the right, the very tall tower you see right there, almost in the middle, just to the left of the small red dome, to the right rather of the small red dome, and to the left of the very large dome that was designed by Brunelleschi, you see Giotto's Campanile, which we'll take a closer look at later. And in fact, Rick Hurst had given us a tour of this during a previous show. And then you see two other towers there. The one on the right of the Campanile, of Giotto's Campanile, is the Campanile that is associated with the church of Badia, the Badia Fiorentina. And then the one just to the right of that is the dome of the Bargello. We'll be taking a closer look at those as we go along. This is a better view looking more from the southeast, and you can see that it almost looks as though the Badia and the Bargello are kind of framing Giotto's Campanile. And this, of course, is the Campanile that was designed by Giotto in the early 14th century. He designed it, but he didn't finish it because he died shortly after that, before it was finished, and it was finished by other people during the next 100 years. And that's another view of it. It's really one of the most beautiful. That's a really spectacular view. Again, you could go up to the top, but there is no elevator. You have to go up by climbing the stairs, which I've never done, I have to admit. One of the few things I've never done while I was in Florence. This is the Campanile that is attached to the church of Santa Maria Novella in the just behind the piazza. You can see in front in the piazza the obelisk that I was speaking about earlier. This is the church of Santa Croce in Florence, and this is the very famous Campanile that's associated with that very, very famous church. That's another view of it. This is a very nice view because you not only get the view of what the Campanile looks like, but you also get the view of what it looks like next to one of the most beautiful chapels. This is the Pazzi Chapel that was commissioned by the Pazzi family, and you know it's right right in the rear of the cloister with that beautiful loggia over there on the left side. So this is a really beautiful spot. And before I leave that, let me just say that that particular tower collapsed in the year 1512. They were always collapsing, I guess because they weren't, very well built and maybe the ground shifted. But this collapsed in 1512 and was then shortly afterwards rebuilt. This is the Synagogue of Florence, which is, of course, a building we looked at once before, and is a very beautiful building. And you see those towers on the left and the right, and there are actually also towers in the rear of the building on the left and the right. And these are really, gorgeous. This is a gorgeous building with a very, very gorgeous tower there with that kind of turquoise dome next to the larger dome. This is the Campanile associated with the Church of Santo Spirito, which is in the Oltre Arno district of Florence. That's a close-up view of it. It's also a very beautiful one, as you can see. This was designed by Brunelleschi. This is a close-up view of two others that we had just seen a few minutes ago. The one on the left is the Badia Fiorentina, which is a church that was constructed during the first millennium in Florence. And on the right side is the Bargello, which was not constructed, of course, as a religious campanile. That's more of a defensive and a bell tower, and we'll take a look at that a little more later on as well. This is one of the most famous towers in the world, up there, certainly, with the Eiffel Tower. And this, of course, is the campanile of the cathedral in Pisa. And most people know it, of course, as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which was built at the very beginning of the second millennium. So I think it was built around 1000 AD, perhaps 1100, not totally sure, and forgot to look up that little detail before I left today. But it's a very, very beautiful tower, as you could see, and many people go up to the top. They weren't able to at first because as it leaned more and more, it was kind of put off limits, and then engineers have propped it up and made it secure, and now many people do go up to the top of that. But if you're interested in going and seeing a leaning tower, and first of all, you know that all the buildings on the Campo dei Miracoli are leaning. It's hard to tell by looking at this picture, but in fact, not only is the tower over there on the extreme right-hand side leaning, but the cathedral right in the center of that picture also leans to a small degree, and the baptistry, which is on the extreme left-hand side of this picture, also leans. So all the buildings located in this field, which was later discovered to be, a marshy area where the ground shifted, over the hundreds of years, causing the buildings to lean in different directions. And as I said, it's kind of hard to see the buildings leaning, except, of course, for the very famous tower. But if you wanted to see a leaning tower and didn't want to go all the way into western Tuscany, you could do so by going into the town of Foligno Valdarno, which is a town that lies about a 20-minute train ride south of Florence. And this is in Foligno Valdarno, one of the churches, and my friend Luca, who lives in this town, pointed out that this is the very famous Leaning Tower of Foligno. And we found this really remarkable because, we were on our way to Pisa right after this, and we, were told that if you want to see a leaning tower, of course it's not leaning to the exact same degree that the famous tower in Pisa is leaning. This is the most leaning tower in all of Italy. It is located in the region of Italy known as Umbria, very near Lake Trasimeno. And that is a tower that was part of the castle of Verrazzano, and it is leaning right now to such a degree that if you look very closely, you could see that there are cables that are actually holding it up. I could make that larger because this is actually an internet picture, but you could see that This tower is just about ready to fall, but those cables are actually holding it from in place and preventing it from falling. What they're going to do with this tower, I don't have the slightest idea, but they might be stabilizing it and permitting people to then visit it. So, you know, I'm not totally sure about that one. This is also the town of Foligno Valdarno, and this is the main Duomo, and that's the bell tower right behind it. This is one of my famous campaniles. This is the very famous and evocative campanile that can be seen from all over Lake Como as you approach the town of Varenna, which is located right over there in the foothills of the Alps. This is my favorite town on all of Lake Como, and this is the town that Laura and I choose to stay in when we stay in on Lake Como. And this is another view of it. Actually, this is the view of the tower from our hotel room. This is one of the hotel rooms that we've had when we've been in Varenna. It's a beautiful view, but you also get the view of that beautiful tower over there on the right side. This is the town of Anghiari, and that's the beautiful countryside around it. And this is the very, very interesting bell tower that appears in the town of Anghiari. And you can see not only is that a beautiful tower, but the building to which it is attached is also very interesting as well. This is the bell tower that is associated with the monastery of San Antimo. Now, the monastery of San Antimo is located in central Tuscany, in the area known as the Val d'Orcia. And we stopped here to see the monastery and, of course, took a picture of that tower. And oddly enough, you know, it's got that beautiful cypress tree right next to it to kind of accentuate the fact that it is a vertical tower. This is the town of Pienza, and once again you see the very, very beautiful bell tower over there on top of that church in the main square with the cypress trees that kind of like ties it all together. This was in the middle of winter. This is the town of La Spezia, which is the very, very southern point of Liguria, right next to Cinque Terre. And this is the two bell towers. One is strictly a bell tower. One looks like a bell tower and also a clock tower on the main cathedral of the town of La Spezia. This is the town of Pitigliano, in the very, very southern portion of Pitigliano. And you can see that there is a bell tower right off over there that's connected to its cathedral off in the distance. This is the town of Bolzano, which is located in northern Italy in the Dolomites. And these are some of the bell towers there. That's a very interesting one. It's a little different from the bell towers you might see in Italy, partly because of the German-Swiss influence of the entire town of Bolzano. If you look at Bolzano closely, and we've done this on this show, you'll see that Bolzano resembles more of a German town or a Viennese town than it does an Italian town. And for that reason, the Campanile actually gives you more of that Viennese German flavor than a lot of the Italians. That's another view of, this is the Piazza Walter, which is located in Bolzano, and there's the tower over there on the right side, and there's another tower over there on the left with the beautiful mountains in the background. This is another tower in Bolzano, which looks strictly a bell tower, but also very interesting to look at. We are now in the town of Lucca, which is located in western Tuscany, and this is the bell tower that goes with the church of San Michele, which is located in the Piazza San Michele, which is near where Puccini, the very famous Italian composer of opera, lived. And this is the Campanile associated with the Church of San Martino. And this is a very interesting campanile because it is actually attached to the church. Usually they're sort of slightly off to the side. This is actually attached to the church with several levels of bells next to this particular one. This is the town of Greve in Chianti, which has a very interesting church, as you could see, and therefore also a very interesting campanile. This is also in Chianti, but not in Greve, but in the town of Ponzano, with a very similar type campanile there, which also serves as a clock tower. This is Civita di Banreggio, and this is one of my favorite towns, as you know. My friend Franco Sala works here. He has his restaurant here. It is not far from the town of Lubriano, which is not far from the very beautiful Umbrian hill town of Orvieto. And there is, of course, the very obvious and beautiful bell tower that you could see from all over this region. We are now actually standing in the town of Lubriano, which is about a mile across the valley, and you could see that bell tower really stands out to a large degree. There's a close-up of it as with the mountains in the background. This is what that tower, the same exact tower that we were just looking at, looks like when you see it from right in the actual piazza next to the Duomo. And that well right there in the middle, of course, is a fake well put there just for show, as Franco told me once. This is the bell tower that kept us up all night in the town of Banreggio. The hotel we were staying in was right across the street from this. In fact, Laura's taking this picture right from the window of the hotel, and you could see that in such close proximity to the hotel, if this thing were ringing every 15 minutes, which it was, you basically had 15 minutes to fall asleep before it would start up again. So I'll never forget that one. This is one of the most famous bell towers in all of Italy. This is the bell tower that's attached to the cathedral in Siena, in central Italy. This is a bell tower in, I believe, Viterbo, which is also, of course, a clock tower. This is also in Viterbo, where we were just last week when Rick was giving us a guided tour. This is a bell tower that's associated with the Church of San Pietro, which is just outside the town of Tuscania. Tuscania is a really wonderful town in Alto Lazio, and Rick will be back in a few weeks to explain a little bit about what this town is all about as well. These are two towers that were also in that same area of Tuscania. And this, of course, is the town of Orvieto, one of my favorite towns, as many of you know, in all of central Italy, and a town that we have visited a couple of times, and we're going back to this coming May. This is really a wonderful town. You can see it has a lot of campaniles throughout the town. You could even see the cathedral over there in the, kind of in the center, or a little off to the right a little bit. And these are some of the bell towers that you see when you walk around the streets of Orvieto. This is a fascinating one. I could not get the name of this, but I found this. This was a really interesting one because it's sort of in a completely different shape. Probably an octagon, because many of the religious buildings in Italy were octagons. And this is also in the same town of Orvieto. This is the town of Verona, which is in northern Italy, probably about an hour west of Venice by train. And it has, as you can see, a couple of interesting towers, and there are different views of them from the ground level this time in Verona. Another one. That's a really interesting looking one. Look at the very top of that. And this is the famous church of San Francesco, which is located in the Umbrian town of Assisi. And as you know, St. Francis did his work in the town of Assisi, and this church was built in his honor. It's a beautiful church inside and out, but you could see the Campanile off there on the left side. Now we're back to this picture. Now, not only did this picture have an obelisk, as you could see at the very top there, but it also has two towers right behind it. So this is, very interesting. This, of course, is the church of Scalinata. I always forget the name of this. Oh, boy. Scalinata della Trinità al Monte. You can see why I forget it. And this is at the very top of the Spanish Steps. And to me, it gives kind of a Gothic look, because a lot of Gothic churches have, rather than one bell tower, actually have two bell towers. So that's the one there. And this is the town of Manarola in Cinque Terre, a beautiful town that we've discussed on this show, one of the early shows. And that is the Campanile that's attached to the church in Manarola. This is the town of Vernazza, also in Cinque Terre, and that's the very, very interesting Campanile they have there. It's another better view of it, really, from the dock. This is the town of Rio Maggiore, also in Cinque Terre, and that's the very top of the Campanile in Rio Maggiore, with the incredibly blue-colored Mediterranean Sea behind it. This is the town of Perugia, and I show you two Campaniles here. One, which is attached to the main cathedral, and the other one off there to the left, with the mountains in the background. This is the Campanile that's attached to I have no idea. I love this view very, very much, and I've even shown it on the show, but I don't know the name of this town, nor do I know the name of the church or anything related to it. And I've done a lot of research. I sent this picture to my friend Luca, who pretty much knows everything there is to know about Italy, and he couldn't figure out where this town was located, although he grew up, as you know, in Tuscany. And he showed it to everybody at the hotel, and nobody could figure out what this town was. But I love this town so much that I decided to show it anyway, so that was that. Okay, now we come to a different type of tower in Italy, the defensive towers that are part of castles. And here are some of the castles that I have personally visited that I would like to show you. This is the castle at Laterina. And this is in eastern Tuscany, and that's, the tower that is used for protection. And, somebody goes up to the top of that as a lookout, and that's the main gate, actually. This is the Campanile that is attached. It's not a Campanile, or it could be a Campanile, because it is a bell tower, that's attached to the castle in the town of Poppi, which is located in eastern Tuscany. This, of course, is the defensive tower and bell tower that is located on top of the Bargello, which at the time this was built was a prison and now is used as one of the really great sculpture museums in all of Florence. This is one of the gates, the main gates in Florence. Florence used to be surrounded by a wall during medieval times, and this is one of the remnants of the gate. And, somebody again was up there as a lookout to let people in and out at various times. This is the castle at the Castello Pergine, which is located in the Dolomites, very, very close to the town of Trento, and overlooking the town of Pergine, as that is the reason why it's called the Castello Pergine. This is connected to the castle at Romena, Romena, which is also located in eastern Tuscany. And that's another view of it, one of the main gates of the Castello Romana. And this is part of the walls of the castle at Viterbo, the wall around Viterbo. And this is another one that I don't know, but I decided to throw it in because I love it so much. It's hard to tell if this is a monastery or a castle, but this is somewhere in central Italy. I can tell you that I don't know where it is, but I do know that when I left Florence and headed south into Tuscany, this was one of the edifices that we passed along the way. And again, in those days, I wasn't doing a TV show, so I didn't take notes on all the things I was passing. We just, stopped and I said, Laura, look at this incredible view. She took it. It's beautiful, but we have no idea where it is. So, we're interested in knowing where that was. The defense of towers as part of domiciles. Now, when domiciles, people built beautiful palazzi throughout Italy, and they always built very tall towers. And part of the reason they did that were really two reasons. One is just to show off. These were very, very wealthy merchants, and they all wanted to outdo each other, so they all decided that they were going to build a tower connected to their houses, but each tower would be bigger than the neighbors. And this is the Tower of Guingi in the town of Lucca. Is it Lucca? Yes. The Tower Guingi in Lucca, which was built in the 1300s. What makes this tower so incredibly beautiful is this part of it. It's actually a little park. It's so big and it's so high up that you can actually go up on this and spend the afternoon underneath those arbors with the most incredible view of the countryside that you have ever seen. And this is a very, very beautiful and very, very famous tower in western Tuscany. These are two very famous towers in the city of Bologna. Bologna is no small town by any means. It's north of Florence, and if you hop on the train in about an hour, you wind up slightly less than an hour in Bologna. You have these two towers. These are called the Due Torri, which are the twin towers, and they were built in the 12th to 13th century. Bologna actually had 180 towers, of which there are only 20 remaining, which is very common. The smaller tower is the Tower of Asinelli, and the larger tower is the Tower of Ganesenda. And those are two very, very evocative towers in Bologna. There's another view of them from the bottom looking up. Back to San Gimignano. San Gimignano originally had 72 towers. They are now down to 15. And again, this was one of those situations where all the wealthy merchants were trying to outdo each other by building a taller tower. And this is very interesting. And San Gimignano is actually known as the Manhattan of Tuscany because Manhattan has all those tall skyscrapers. This is another view of San Gimignano from a slightly different angle. And then my favorite tower is the Tower of Manelli. Now, there used to be 4 towers on the Ponte Vecchio, one at each corner. And when the Vasari corridor was being built, that's the Vasari corridor there with the red top, the red stucco top. It comes out of the Uffizi, which was the offices of the Medici. It goes across the Arno River to the other side, eventually winding up at the Pitti Palace, which was where the Medicis lived at the time. And this was created by Vasari, the famous architect and painter of the 16th century, in order to prevent the Medicis from having to walk among the populace when they wanted to get from their offices to their home. So they built it across the Ponte Vecchio, and when they got to the other end where the Manelli Tower was located, they said to Manelli, please take down your tower. The Medicis want this corridor built, and you have to take down, and he refused. And apparently the townspeople said, okay, figure out another way of getting around the tower without tearing the tower down. And Vasari figured out that the only way to do that was to go around it. So he built this extension. You could see that it actually comes out, goes around, and then comes back to where the rest of the Vasari corridor actually is located. The Manelli Tower, very interesting. This is another house tower in one of the palazzi in Florence. This is in Pisa. You know, Pisa has the Leaning Tower, but it also has a beautiful, obviously other beautiful towers. Towers on public buildings at the Campidoglio in Rome. I have to kind of move quickly now. This is the Tower of Melizzi, which was where Nero watched the burning of Rome. This is an ancient tower right behind Trajan's Market. This is the tower that's associated with the public building known as the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. This is the tower that is right next to the Pope's Palace in the town of Viterbo in Lazio. This is a tower in the town of Pisa, another tower in Pisa, and then spires. This is the Milan Cathedral. The Milan Cathedral has 135 spires coming out of it. And if you look from the very top of the cathedral, you will see these. If you look very closely, you will see statues on top of the spires. And there are over 1,000 statues all around the spires. This is an incredible view from the top of the cathedral looking out at the town, at the city of Milan. That's the Orvieto Cathedral with its spires. This was built, of course, in the 1200s. There's another view of the cathedral in Orvieto. These are the spires that were put into the gardens in Lake Maggiore. There are 3 islands. This is the Isola Bella, and these are the spires that were put there. Another view of some very, very beautiful spires, which constitute, I suppose, a tower as well. And that brings us to the end of the show. And the next show we will be having will be next Friday night, March 15th, and it will be Frank Palaya's versions of the Towers of Italy. And not only will he be discussing the towers, but he will also be discussing, his photography, his Polaroid photography, and, giving a little more better interpretation of towers than you saw tonight. So I would like to thank you for watching tonight. I hope you enjoyed that show, and I look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, buona notte e buona fortuna.